Hello, if you struggle with your sleep, get one of these bad boys, Lumi lights. They wake you up in a natural sort of way, and it's like, say for example you need to get up at 7 o'clock, it will start the light at... This job has surely got to be up there with the worst household jobs. Doing the dishes, fine. Putting the washing in, fine. Hoovering, fine. Doing this, one arm is going to be or this arm is going to be massive by the end of 2017. That's why it's important that you alternate, because then this arm is going to be massive too. Well, it is already massive, and they're already massive. So as I'm waiting for my coffee to brew, I wanted to touch upon what today's vlog is going to be about, and it's going to be about going to failure at every single set. What is that all about? So, what we're going to be talking about is cumulative fatigue and why you should stop training to failure, and why if you stop training to failure, you could be getting even more out of your training, which in the long run is going to lead to more gains. We're also going to be touching on reps in reserve and the RPE scale as well, something that you guys probably have never heard of, but is really quite important. Really, really important. It's as if the fitness community has a real sort of positive perspective on individuals who always go to failure. You'll see them, you know, a lot of people, the guy bench pressing with his spotter behind him, gets to his 8th rep, that should have been his last rep, because he's clearly got no more left in the tank. Yet he keeps on going, and then his spotter is upright rowing with him. 2 exercises in one, bloody brilliant. But it's as if you see a guy going to failure, it's like, oh, look at him training hard. Fair play. You know, the old hardcore approach. And that's what people seem to get from it, is that they'll see someone do things to failure, be in agony, yet is that person actually yielding better results than you by training like that? Now, in terms of training, there is a few definitions when we talk about failure. So let's talk about failure. Okay, let's talk about failure, and the one that we're talking, or going to be talking about today, is the mainstream type failure. So the one that I've just mentioned. So when a guy, girl, whatever, goes to failure and literally can't get any more reps out. That's the one that we're going to be focusing on today. Now, what Mr. Failure may be doing compared to you is, let's say, for example, we're going to refer Mr. Failure as Mr. Failure. What's actually happening is Mr. Failure, or what he's doing different to you, is that he's accumulating fatigue early on in his working sets. Okay, this is called cumulative fatigue, and it's where you accumulate too much fatigue too early on in your sets. And in turn, believe it or not, you can actually do less. So even though it looks as if you're training, or Mr. Failure's training really, really hard, he's red in the face, in the long term, he could, or throughout that session even, he could actually be lifting less. But don't get me wrong, I want to say this now. There's 100% a place for training to failure, which, yeah, I'm going to get onto in a bit. But by all means, you know, train hard. It's important that we train hard. It's important that we put in more stimulus in our muscles week by week if our goal is to sort of get bigger and get stronger. But by all means, train hard, train smart. So what we have here is the table. It's back again for the second time in 2017. And what we're going to be comparing is Mr. Failure and you. So I found this on Harry Ranson's Instagram page. So it was very insightful. And something that I've wanted to touch upon for a very long time. What we can see here is what's he called again? Oh fucking hell, this happens every time. Mr. Failure, that's it. Mr. Failure is in the red on top, and then we have you. We'll use the chin-ups as the example. So in the first set, Mr. Failure goes to failure. He does 10. That's how many he manages. Then on the second set, he can only get 6 up because he's accumulated that fatigue. And then on the third set, he only gets 4. So over the total of the required number of sets he was meant to do, he accumulated 20 reps. Now, if we compare this to you've got, you're a bit switched on. You've got a good coach who does your programming for you and whatnot. And you've done 8 across the board because you haven't accumulated too much fatigue at the start of your first set. So over the course of those sets, you've racked up a total of 24 sets. Reps even, not sets, more volume. So you're going to get more bang for your buck, say. With anything that impairs with total volume, it essentially means less growth over time. So in order for someone to know how sort of hard they need to be going through various sets, there's an RPE scale or a RIR section on the training program. And this is an RPE scale, which means rate of perceived exertion. And then you've got RIR, which is reps in reserve. So I'm going to be using reps in reserve today because I think it's a lot easier to understand. If you want to know what RPE or how it works, just comment below and I'll explain it. So RIR basically means reps in reserve. So let's say, for example, you've got 3 sets of 12 to hit, and let's say the reps in reserve is 2. Once you hit that 12th rep, you should have 2 reps left in the bank. So you could essentially, as soon as you finish your set, you could be like, oh, I could have got another 2 out then. And that's what reps in reserve is, and that's how it works. And it essentially tells you how hard you need to be working throughout a set. Because, believe it or not, you don't have to go to failure in order to make progress. I know, crazy, innit? Despite what Kai Green tells you. The reason as to why sometimes I make my clients not necessarily go to failure, but we can say it or call it as an AMRAP. So AMRAP again means as many reps as possible. And what this essentially does is it sort of allows them to sort of understand that they can do more, because I think a lot of people who are maybe new to fitness tend to not be very confident, and sometimes that scarcity of being able to put on more weight onto the bar can be quite daunting. And I totally get that, because when you're going through a strength phase, even the top powerlifters out there, you do get that sense of nervousness and anxiety and a bit of time, I don't know, would you call it anticipation? Yeah, I suppose you would. In your stomach, where you get that feeling and you think, fuck, am I actually going to be able to lift this? And that's a really, really good way to go about things, is by giving someone an AMRAP, because you can gauge then sort of how much more they can do based on their AMRAP. So rather than putting a shitload on the bar, you can drop the weight down by quite a bit and make them do an AMRAP, and that's one way how you can gauge whether someone is getting stronger or not. Yet, like with AMRAPs, like with training to failure, there's a time and a place for it. Now, ideally, think about it this way: if you're going to be going to failure, what's safer? To be going to failure when you've got, say, a load on your back, so let's use the squat as the example, or is it better to go to failure on something like, and I'm talking failure here now, I'm talking proper failure. Is it going to be safer going to failure in the squat, or complete failure in something like the leg quad extensions? That's one tip, hashtag tip, with regards to failure. Second one is, if you are planning on doing failure sort of sets, potentially make it the last one, the last set. And another thing, if you are going to run a failure sort of block, do it for a maximum of 2 to 3, possibly 4 weeks. Because again, the amount of fatigue that you're actually going to be accumulating is a lot.